How you doing, everybody? And welcome to the We'd Been There podcast. This is the first time we're streaming it live for our subscribers on Facebook in the Facebook Grow Community. I am Rick from Uncle Rick's Genetics. This is Matt from Parts Unknown. And tonight we have episode 9, which is Flower.
Power.
The cool
Can
thing
you see
is
me on your screen, bro?
Yes. Oh, I forgot to do that for you, man. Hold on. Hold on, buddy.
I don't see nothing.
I'm sorry, friend. 1 second.
It's okay.
Well, we had to throw this one together tonight.
Yeah, I was out partying. There we go. That's better.
There we go, buddy. So, we are. Let me get the comments. That's comments. Right. This is a little different going live from in here. And I apologize to our audio listeners. Oh, let me tag people.
Oh, while Eric's doing that and getting that situated, Big Daddy Manny's going to do a little dab of whiskey.
I don't have a dab to do with you this time, Matt. Oh, I do. I'm just not going to get up and get it.
Dude, you're on dabs already?
I'm not out of dabs. I am out of water.
He's smoking that hash off tinfoil, right? This is probably going to destroy my lungs.
It's crazy how silent your mic goes.
Oh, yo. A little dab will do ya.
So, what I was going to say is, for this portion on, from this portion of the podcast on, we're going to be having our community members that are subscribers on Facebook in the actual podcast for chats and comments and stuff like that. So, when you hear us answering questions, that's where people are interacting from. If you want to get into that or be part of that, that is part of our subscription on our Facebook page, and you can find that by just going to our page, Uncle Rick's Genetics, and there's a subscribe button up at the top. So, without further ado, flowering. Flower. Right. So, there's a couple things to cover first. What method are you going to use to flower your plant? Are you going to do low stress training or high stress training? Are you going to be doing schwazzing, Kyle Cushman technique? Are you going to be getting into any super cropping? Or are you going to get into any monster cropping any point in flower?
I mean, so everything that we basically went over from the very beginning to where we are now, this is what you prepared for. This is the phase that, I'm not going to say that really matters because they all really matter, but, this is the one that's going to bear the fruits of your labor here, so this is where you're going to put all your information, everything that you've done up until now, to use and your knowledge. So Eric's already talking about, we went into flipping your plant last week. Now we're more so into like week actual 1 of flower, so what Eric's talking about, that should pretty much have been done the previous week, and you should be just setting your plant up ready for that thing to just rock out. But yeah, training. Just because you're in week one of flower, you can continue to train your plant.
Right. So I mean, it depends. If you scrogged it, you definitely want to clean up in the week one, right? And then you want to clean up in week 3,
Absolutely.
and you want to clean up again in
Absolutely.
week 5, right? So that's definitely important to do. If you're scrogging, you have to clean up. If you're not scrogging, no matter what, you basically got to clean the plant up. It's going to grow budlings like crazy in that point. But if you do low stress training, like just bending and putting clips on and stuff like that, it's going to be pretty straightforward. But people get into the first or second week of flower and super crop all the
Yeah.
tops. They don't defoliate much of the bottom buds. They keep select ones. And this is part of the flowering process. Not really. We went over pre-flower basically. Like, you change
Right.
the lights. You want to defoliate it real good and scrog it, or get it in its comfortable position in pot at that time. But now being in flower, you actually have to follow some sort of regiment with what you do. If you're unless you're schwazzing it, which is ripping the leaves off like from 3 nodes down all the way to the base, taking every single thing off. So you have these stems that stick up, and then just like one little top on each side.
Yeah.
There's
And
not
again,
much to do.
just to reiterate, some of the quick points from last episode, because they're super important. Like, this is where your plant is really going to be ramping up its metabolism, its production. It's think of it as like starting your car. Like vegetative, you're just starting it up, letting it warm up, letting the idle come down, getting the heat turned on to where it's nice and toasty. Then now you're actually, driving that car, pretty quickly, rushing on the way to work. So, be prepared for that. Be prepared for your plant to start uptaking more water. Be prepared for your plant to start tearing through nutrients and minerals and micronutrients at a very high rate. Like you can have a perfectly healthy plant, a week in a flower, 2 weeks in a flower, 3 weeks in a flower. If you're not keeping up with it, you're going to notice like your leaves are starting to yellow, which is part of, you have to be able to determine whether that's a natural leaf fall or if it's a deficiency, because I feel like people also get that mixed up and they see natural leaf fall and they're like, oh no, my plant needs food. Not always, so you have to be able to determine these things and what's good and what's bad, what's normal, what's abnormal. So like I said, this is where you're putting all that knowledge to base. You should already have read your plant through vegetative stage and kind of see how it reacts to certain things. And I'm not going to say double it, but you're slowly going to increase certain things as you peak in flower. Week
Right.
6, 7, that's really like your peak. You peak closer to the end, more so other than the middle. I mean, you could peak in the middle too. But it's more so towards the end, last 2-3 weeks. It's kind of bringing itself back down and just focusing on terpenes and bud swelling and all that stuff. So definitely have that good start. Fresh soil. Or you're definitely going to want to test your parts per million in your soil, your EC, your pH. You're going to have to want to test all that if you're not going into fresh organic soil, like up potting, if you haven't done that the week prior or but right before, you're flipping your plant, then, you're going to make sure that you have all that stuff, all that information at your disposal so that I said disposable, look at me like an idiot, disposal, so that you can kind of just cruise through flower, without any like crazy, like, what do I do now moments. I mean, we're here to help as well, and there's a lot of people in our community that will lend knowledge and experience towards you and try to help you along the way. But you should also be wanting to learn for yourself as well.
We have a question in the chat here. Actually, shout out to Peter and Rose. Thanks for joining us. I experimentally attempted to top my first plant, evidently forced flower. I'm assuming that's an auto, and you force flower by topping it. I mean, depending on the age, it doesn't. I don't think it could be a bad thing, but could have been close to flower. Could have not done it. Could have just been coincidental timing. But usually forcing something into flower and it being a bad thing, your plant's like small, 2 nodes. You know what I mean? If you top something with like 8, 10 nodes, it's like, decently large plant. Most autos flip at like around 30 days. So, if you're anywhere around there and it starts flowering after you topped it, I don't know if you forced it to flower or if it's coincidental. And I don't think you would have done it much harm, honestly, because it's going to veg through its flower cycle as an auto anyway. Just because that's kind of its purpose the whole time.
There's really nothing you can do at that point. I mean, your plants are already doing its thing now.
Right.
You can make a choice to scrap the project if you think it's too small, or like grow it out and see what happens.
You said way early. What's way early?
Way early is like 5 nodes, maybe 6 nodes.
Way early. I don't know. Maybe that's like 2. Try to manifold an auto. That would actually be crazy if you could manifold an auto.
I mean, here's the thing though. Like, I have a hard time believing it was way too early. I mean, I don't know what his plant looks like, and I'm just saying, like, I top autos at like the 3rd, 4th node.
Right. It's pretty typical.
And like they do fine. So like the only thing that I can see that would trigger that flower cycle just that little bit earlier is if you topped like 7, 8, 9 node, maybe.
Or you topped it twice.
Yeah, I mean, if you top it twice, that's I can see that. But like, I would like to think, like, even if he says it's way early, that he still has a viable plant. Like, even if you get like half an ounce off of it.
Peter, what's way early, bro? Yeah. What does way early mean, sir? Now you gotta give us that. But it's autos are a different animal. Sometimes it's just genetics. Sometimes they're not in a big enough pot. Sometimes there's other things that trigger flower that you weren't, considering. He's saying 4th node. How big is the pot size?
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be something that's the smoking gun. Usually autos
I don't know,
do
though.
that.
Most people know to start autos in a larger pot.
Yeah, but that's not that typical anymore, dude. I honestly have sent many autos to people to grow out, and I'm like, how they doing? And they're like, transplanting them tomorrow. And I'm like, wow, this is getting very common. Like, and I know it's not worth risking it, because if you get a really vigorous plant and it smacks the bottom of that cup, it's going to be like, well, this is me now. And if you switch it out, it might get a little bigger, but usually they stay like that. But I don't think it's worth it. I see a lot of people doing it, and actually Peter had a really nice critical 47 that he grew out that he transplanted, and I told him he got lucky. The one with pistols, that's not a small plant though. For an auto, that's I saw the plant that he's talking about, actually, Matt. It's in the subscriber chat, but like, that plant is pretty decent size for an auto. Even if it's starting pistils at that age, that's its pre-flower. It doesn't just start flowering as soon as it shows pistils. It's going to pre-flower and start to stretch before it's actually setting into flower,
I think that's just genetics, dude, because those two
could be
that I grew they were big fucking plants for autos, bro. Like, big.
Oh, well, this is a different... I don't think he's growing the critical again, but the one that he did grow out was transplanted, and it was probably, this big, but it was just like a beast, you know what I mean? And then the one he's growing now, I don't know what strain that is, but it is got a decent structure on it. You know what I mean? And it's just starting with a couple pistils. So I think it's in pre-flower. I don't think it's cause
Yeah.
for concern. You know? I don't think it's
And
cause
like
for
your
concern.
plants are gonna your plants autos especially, like they're still gonna stretch, you know.
Yeah. They're not even supposed to really be that big of a plant. You know, an auto is something that's going to grow quick and give you a yield quickly. You know, when you grow a bunch of them, you know that's what makes it worth it. Um,
Yeah.
but you know, when you get into like big autos or what they used to, it used to be the big thing, the XXL autos. It was like
Yeah.
a big thing. Like if it didn't say XXL, no one cared about it. Um, they're just like closer to the photo lineage than
It's like
anything.
BC Big Bud.
You know, you get the longer veg time, the longer veg period. You know, more of an adaptation to 18 hours a day of vegging from them being crossed, and that's really like where you get a lot of this drawback where it flowers 2 weeks from seed and you get this little
Yeah.
tiny plant, or it freaking never starts flowering. You're like, is this thing an auto? And then all of a sudden, boom, it's flowering and it's larvae because it's a big giant plant that can't sustain itself. So that's the
Yeah.
extremes both ways.
That's the thing. Like, because I've grown plants that size and they definitely cannot sustain themselves.
Sometimes
Like
they
when you
just
grow,
needed more dirt, if you'd gone
yeah,
with 20 gallons maybe, but holy
like when
crap.
you're growing big autos, like big autos are a challenge. You know, like they really are a challenge because you have like double the amount of work to do in half the amount of time,
And
and you can't fuck up.
you have no
And it's
idea.
even worse because like if you fuck up, you're not fucking up like 2 ounces, 3 ounces. Like you're fucking up like maybe a pound, off of an auto, which
Off a
is
big
insane.
one, right? And you have no
You know,
clue that that little plant is just going to grow what it should in a week in like 2 days, and you're just going to be like, oh shit, damn it, I was not expecting that. Like um, Peter
if you
said he
watch
needs
time
some.
lapse of weeds and how
Yeah.
weeds grow, like
Oh, dude, it's
how
nuts.
a marijuana plant will grow just as fast.
It's pretty crazy. Unencumbered roots grow fast plant. That's
Yeah.
why hydro is nuts. Peter's saying he needs some photos. What do you suggest? Never done a photo before. Well, we're going over basically a photo flower period now. So you would switch your light to 1212 last week's episode if you go and check it out on YouTube or uh, podcast network. You can find us on there to check out last week's episode. But you would have changed the lights from 18.6 to 12.12, and that would start pre-flower, and then a week or so later is where we're at. So we would be, right now in the first real week of flower where, it's really starting to create some dense pistil hairs. And this is where you would already have applied the technique we're talking about, whether that's LST or doing any schwazzing or heavy defoliation or scrogging. Any of that would have already happened. Now we're at the stage of like, you know, you could possibly have a plant that's stretching 3 times the size of it was, and you're running out of room. You know, that's where we're at. Like week 3, week 4 flower, where it's just starting to stack. Yeah, it's starting to stack, and it's at the end of stretch, or sometimes, at week 2, you experience unbelievable stretch, and you have to do super cropping, not necessarily because you want to, but because you have to keep your plant from overgrowing its environment.
And now's like also a really good time because week 1, your bud sites are going to be starting to like really develop. Like
2
so
weeks
now's a good time
after
to identify
the
it.
flip, two
Yeah,
weeks
I mean,
after
but
lights
you'll
go.
Right. So now, I mean, week one of flower after transition, like you can kind of tell where they're going to start popping out at. Now is actually a really good time to get a jump start on,
Foliage.
dead space nodes, like
Yes, sir.
plucking bud sites that are low on your plant, because even though you plucked them 2 weeks ago or you defoliated 2 weeks ago, they're still going to pop on the bottom. Like
Right.
it's inevitable. You're going to have a few sites on the very bottom of the plant. You're going to want to start removing those earliest, the better. Um, and really like shaping your plant and noticing like where your crowns are going to be, where your shoots are still coming up that are going to, maybe not produce top tier tops, but they're going to be towards the top of your plant. Because you could have a plant that's growing straight up, but when you lay it flat down, so this tiny little node that'd be growing off this way, well, what does that do? It stands straight up and starts growing up, like when you use a scrog net. And that will essentially reach the even level of your canopy and become almost like a top tier plant. It's going to grow a larger flower bud for you than the bottom part of that branch. Um, so plucking those off is important as well. The underneath side bud sites that aren't going to get light, that are going to be completely shadowed by the top of your canopy. You can start doing those. That's stuff that should be done all the way up until like week 3 or 4 of flower. Just plucking bud sites that pop up and appear.
Right.
But now's the time again, like Eric said, with training, like shaping your plant, understanding how fast it's growing, how it's stretching, how much space you're going to need. Because like when you start weaving branches in a scrog net and you're going in one direction with something, but it starts growing really wildly, and you're like, shit, I'm going to have to bend it back this way. Trust me, like when you're weaving that in the scrog net and it comes time to harvest, that is like one of the biggest pains.
Yeah.
It's like
you're cutting it out.
It's like your kid tied knots in his shoe like 47,000 times, and you have to figure out. And like
the bus is coming.
Man came and like pulled it really tight, and then they poured water on it. Like
and they tied it again. That's too real though. That's way too real, dude. I told somebody that the other day. So make sure you defoliate, because if not, you're literally going to be cutting your plant out of the scrog, or cutting the scrog apart to get your plant out of there, and it's true. But if you have
I've done it more than once, and like I do about it too. Like I'm just like, nah, that's never gonna happen again, and it fucking happens again, and you're just like, fuck, I really need to like pay attention and start formulating a plan. Like if you start bending shit early and weaving it in a different direction, and being able, or just have a plan to compensate, like, hey, if this thing starts growing and I'm going this way to the corner, but I'm going to run out of space in 8 inches, what's my next move here? It's kind of like a little bit of a game of chess with your plant,
right. I want to add something to that. You're saying even canopy. So let's say you scrog it out and, you did what you had to a week or two ago, and now you're in like, 1 week of stacking, and you know what you're going to keep. You defoliate a second time. And as you go through flower, you get scragglers where it's like one missile bud is just like, I'm going to be 6 inches taller than every other bud in the perfect canopy you've now laid out, because all the other ones are stretched out, but some of them are already sticking up. So as they stretched and you're moving them, that's their stretch growth. But this one's just there. It doesn't have anywhere to go except for straight up through the scrog, right? So these are the ones that you're going to have to super crop if you're.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you don't have to, but a lot of the times, with LED and the way people's lights are, super cropping it is going to get you to be able to move the light down as much as you can, and have as little of needing the light turned all the way up to get good coverage. It'll keep your PPFD the same, like I said, without using as much resource. But then the second thing that'll do is, if that's a main branch that everything's contributing to, and a lot of the shoots that are underneath it are coming off of that, are the ones that you've run around through the scrog. what you're going to do when you super crop that, you're going to be breaking that cell wall and essentially disrupting that nutrient highway that the water's traveling up to the buds that are essentially the main buds. So super cropping is, aside from just a space saving tactic, a way for you to, it's like after topping. So you top the plant, right? Then you get this monster branch that's got all these mains on it, on the main stem, but then you super crop that main. Everything below it that's supposed to be going to the main is now going to be distributed outward. There's nowhere else for it to go because you broke this, like I said, that highway in the stem, and you're just going to roll it in your fingers, pretty decent sized stem, and just kind of, try to get the thing to be like Play-Doh a little bit, and it'll grow a humongous knuckleback. It's no worries. But at the same time, what you're not going to realize is happening is everything around it that's small getting this huge nutrient boost uptake and water uptake is going to now catch up to that size. And by the time it stands back up, and it's going to have like a literal elbow in it where you broke it, right? Everything else is going to catch back up. So it's not just a way for you to mitigate something that's too tall, but it is a way for things to catch back up if it's a main and there's a ton of shoots, offshoots coming off of that are going to allow the rest of the canopy to really blow up.
Yeah. And if it is like one of those offshoots that's reaching towards the top and like it's growing above your canopy, just super crop it. Like, don't be afraid to do that because it's a bottom shoot. I mean, in all actuality, it really has no business being there anyway, but it's there now. So
I'd
like,
cut
don't
it
be
off.
afraid to like. I mean, you can cut it, but I mean, if you think it's gonna produce something, if it looks viable, I mean, super crop it. Like, don't be scared because something that really should have been there anyway. And if you lose it, it's really not a big deal. It's not your main. It's really wasn't gonna produce shit anyway. It just randomly grew up for no fucking reason at all, other than just to be part of the party. Um, so like, yeah, super crop that shit. Throw a fucking training clip on it. Keep it down. Pop it under the scrog. You can crack that node right under the scrog net, and then just feed that branch back underneath and put it in a different direction so it's not running into anything else, and it's still gonna stay right there at the top with the rest of your canopy. So it's gonna grow with it. But don't, yeah, because like I used to do that in the beginning. I'm like, damn, do I want to fuck with that? Like, I don't know. It might be a good fucking branch. I don't want to cut it off. I don't know what to do with it. And like it ends up being a decent sized nug, but it's all the way the fuck up here now, and your plant looks ridiculous.
I I see Rose says he has four autos in flower right now. What stage of flower? How deep in flower are you? And in flower for an auto, you're basically not doing anything but getting your feedings. Um, you know, I would be checking runoff, making sure your plant's eating what you're putting into the soil, or if it's cocoa, I would be making sure that with increasing uh, nutrients, that what's coming out is also, not just staying in the pot the whole time and getting flushed. So you're not going overfeeding or underfeeding. But realistically, if you topped your plant at the fourth or fifth node for an auto and you just let it grow and you do basic LST and you just kind of pull things into the directions you want, that's kind of better off. It's more of a waiting game for autos, in my opinion. I wouldn't really mess with an auto too much, just because you should already have done your defoliation when you flip, not when you flip, but when you start seeing it do its pre-flowering. You want to be taking those budlets off, those little tiny buds that are going to grow on the bottom, but leave the fan leaves, as we were talking about in a couple episodes ago. Um, you've been feeding them food. So did they just start flowering, or have they been flowering for a week or some weeks? And what have you done already? Have you topped it at a fourth or fifth node, or have you done any other like tying down or LST clips or anything like that. But yeah, autos are kind of easy peasy. That's the whole thing. You know, once you get into flower with an auto, it's kind of like final drive on a drag race. Like, you know, don't hit the walls, and you're in the home stretch. You know, flower with photo is a bit different because of the fact that it wants to keep growing, and it will grow so big. And so many bud sites that you'll have so much that you won't really want to use, that there's stuff you have to do preventative maintenance the whole time. He said, I haven't defoliated yet, but I'm going to tie it down tomorrow. Word. Is it starting to flower? Is it flowering? And if it is, how long has it been in flower? But yeah, with the photo period, you know, you have to increase the food, and then on top of increasing the feed, you have to decrease the sites eating the feed to redirect the food to the right tops. Because if it's not there, it's not getting fed, right? A lot of people are like, does it really divert energy to the tops if you take off the lower buds? And that's a great question, but it's also like super common sense. If the bud site's not there, how's the plant going to feed it? Right? So where's all that ability to grow plants with 150 bud sites taken off to 100? Now you've got like 1.25%. You know?
I mean, think of it even like this. Like, you're a parent and you have 10 kids. And you have a loaf of bread.
For
and
a
there's
while.
only 20 slices of bread in the loaf. So each kid gets 2. But they're always fucking hungry. You know,
so you get
they're
rid of a
always,
couple.
like, starving. So, you know, if you reduce the amount of kids and knock it down to 5.
See, so you send 5 of your kids off to their friend's house to eat dinner for every night of the week, and then your loaf of bread goes further.
Now you get 4 pieces. Now they're like, hey, we're getting there. We're kind of full, but not there yet.
Rose says,
2 more focus.
For about a week, it's in flower. Right, so you should be looking at this plant and taking any little tiny undesirable bud sites off that you can imagine the canopy is going to cover up, or is not going to get good light, or is not at, you know, peak PBFD, or is really, really going to be nothing. Like, you know, and I would take a bunch of those off on the bottom 25% of the plant, and then I would kind of leave it alone. And at week 3, in 2 more weeks, I would do it again on the bottom, like 40 to 50% of the plant. I would take all those little undesirable bud sites off, and, you know, you'll see the other bud sites just start taking off because there's nothing else for the plant to do but that. It's also going to start stretching, so keep in mind some of the bud sites you think are fine are going to be in the 40%. So don't go getting upset about taking some buds off. It's going to pay you back, trust me, a big, big, big amount. And the other side of flower, where this plant's going to be able to divert all its attention to 25 or 30 main buds all over instead of 60 or 50 or even 40. You know, 10 small buds make a difference on the bottom side of the plant, because not only do they have to grow with less light, but they have to use more energy because they're actually physically moving towards where they see light. The other ones are in the light. They don't have to do anything but get fat. You know what I mean? And a plant that has a lot of PPFD on it, even if it wants to stretch, it won't stretch that much. It will do what it needs to in those places where it's not uptaking enough. So you'd see lower bud sites stretching more than uppers with a photo, not necessarily an auto, but with a photo. And that's why if you have a big bud site, leave it right in the middle. And, you know, if your plant's lopsided, put the tall side right in the light, because it'll stop it from stretching, and the small side will grow, you know, first. Just a little tip for if you're not going to be tying things down. The closer it is, the less it'll stretch. people put the smaller part under the light directly, and they're like, I don't know why it's not getting any bigger. It doesn't have any need to, you know. It's complacent, just sitting there. And
as you progress too through flower, like you'll notice these things as well. You'll see what's going on and what's not going on.
Yeah, we get a pretty good groove on flower in general. This is really just like, and I said this before to a couple people, you know, podcast is typically not like a start to finish, you know, collective that connects on last week and we just keep going, you know, episode for episode. This is more or less for like a beginner to say, well, I don't really know much, or someone that's like, I know from the past, but you know, I need something, a refresher. That's what really the first 10 episodes are about. And now we're in flowers. So the next thing we're going to talk about next week, which is going to be our 10th episode and our final educational structured episodes here. And that's going to be harvesting and drying and curing. So we're going to talk about the end of this then. But, you know, this is more or less if you need a refresher or you want to hear our take on it again, you can go back. It's all labeled. And, you know, you can, well, we can give it to people to check it out. But,
Medflower, though.
Huh?
Well, I think we'll have an episode of Medflower, though, right?
Your connection is doing weird stuff. We'll have an episode about Midflower. I mean, we're going. Yeah. We started this at Midflower 4 weeks in.
Yeah. No, I mean like Midflower, dude. Like where, you know, some people would amend their soils again for, you know, last few weeks of flower, finishing off the plant.
I mean, you could. I mean, that's on the list. The next thing I have here on the list is proper PPFD and ensuring that, you know, your plant's getting enough light. Rose said his double grape is sure stretching. Yeah, even the autos, they stretch the most, you know, and they can get big. Even autos can get pretty big after stretching. But the proper PPFD, and this is something every single person I know struggles with. If your light says to hang at 20 inches in flower, hang it at 20 inches in flower and move it with the canopy. If you start at 20 inches and it stretches 15, you move it 15 inches up while it's stretching. It should have that optimal uptake from whatever hanging height it says to do that at. If it says 12 inches is where you should be at. And I know it might sound crazy, but that's where the manufacturer spec is. That's where they're taking their measurements from. So if you're looking for 1,000 ppfd at 15 inches, you know, keep it moving with the plant at 15 inches the whole way so you can maintain the correct ppfd. I can't tell you how many people I see their plants go into flower because they just turn the light up 100% from veg. I see them go into flower and they kind of just taper off and stop. You know, they started strong and then they didn't do anything. And a lot of the time I'm after the fact, you know, I'm realizing these people had their lights at 100%. And this is something we talked about with veg, which is not going over 50% with your light, right? And this is the reason is because when you go through flower, you're going to turn it up 10% every week and keep it at the recommended hanging height. When you do that, you're increasing the PPFD, but you're not really letting the plant catch up. So just as it gets used to it after a week, you're going to turn it up again. And you're not going to change the hanging height. You're going to keep the hanging height the same. So it's going to continue to get more intense. When you turn the light all the way up and the plant grows into the light and it gets more intense the closer the plant gets to the light, but the plant has to have that vigor to grow that big. And if it's a short plant, it might never get there. You might just get, you know, poor PPFD uptake from the plant. So recommended hanging height's important. especially if you're going off
Spectrum,
their numbers. Spectrum is even more important. Spectrum's even
because
more
that will,
important.
the right spectrum will reduce your plant from stretching as well.
Right.
If you have the wrong spectrum, it's going to affect how your plant grows, how it, is producing, and how it's stretching. Yes, spectrum is very important.
And the final thing I have on the list is proper nutrients and boosters. This is something that we could probably do 10 episodes on is plant boosters for flower.
Boosters.
You know,
I think we should have a little car that goes across the screen with a little
plant boosters. Yeah, dude, it's crazy how many there are. There's probably for every single strain there's probably 5 plant boosters. Flower boosters. And it's absurd. You could try a new one every year, and I don't think you'd go through all of them in a lifetime. Even if you tried, sorry, not every year, every grow. If you did 3 grows a year, I don't think you get through them all. But another thing people use, and it's not really a nutrient, some are, but this is the point where people start to use plant growth regulators, PGRs. PGRs are not synthetic only. Kelp is a plant growth regulator. Seaweed. There's tons of plant growth regulators that are not synthetic, but the ones that are synthetic are usually an issue. Just as the chemical compound they are without igniting them and inhaling it. But your plant doesn't recognize this stuff. It stays within the plant, especially if the buds are formulated with it the whole time. So I would urge against that.
And there's all different kinds of PGRs. There's foliar PGRs. There's soil PGRs. There's water PGRs.
Right.
There's so many different types.
Right. If you just use fish emulsion, that's a PGR. It's just anything that's going to boost the plant's growth. If you took crab shell and put it in the soil, that's a PGR. If you took crab shell and refined it really, really, really well, it'd become chitin. And there's even compounds like chitosan that you could spray your plant with, and it will boost every single part of the plant's immunity, growth, auxin growth, because it's a growth regulator. So this is the point where people do that.
Everything's a PGR. PGR is basically pretty much anything that's not of the soil. So like anything that you're adding in addition, it's technically a PGR. Now a lot of these other ones, like some of the stuff Eric's talking about, are like highly concentrated, highly refined, very specific.
Well, I mean, there are things that are neither. Like willow water would be considered a plant growth regulator, but it's for root growth.
Yeah.
But like
it's adding.
What it's gonna do.
Adding molasses to your water so that you're feeding the microbiology. That's a plant growth regulator. It's causing some type of reaction within your plant, whether it's in the root zone, soil, up in your actual growth area.
I think when
all these things affect one another. Your roots control your growth. Your growth feeds the roots. Water exchange,
right?
Exchange.
Right, but what is molasses doing exactly, and what period is it going to be used most effective? Because like you could tell me, I can tell you exactly when to use chitosan and exactly what it's going to do at those stages because it regulates specific growth.
I use molasses the entire way through.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know if that's technically a PGR. I mean, it's like you're boosting the plant by giving it food, but the other ones, like the plant takes these in and it has specific growth patterns based on the plant's time period of life. So like if you gave it chitosan in veg, it's going to boost its immune system. But if you give it chitosan in flower, it's going to uptake 5 times the nutrients.
Absolutely.
So like you're regulating the growth by jacking it all the way the hell up instantly by giving it to it.
I mean, there's times where you do that, and that's like
Vitamin
said,
B is a PGR.
But that's one of your more heavily concentrated PGRs, that has a specific time to use and effect on the plant. That's not something you would use through every, week of your growth.
You could grow a plant on vitamin B only. That's how all the I'm sure you remember that. Think back to like all the garden days, all the plant growing shit. Remember how much of it was freaking straight up vitamin B? Like it would be like B this, B that. It was all like different B. They were just white powders in a bag. You remember that?
Yeah. But that's like all your energy.
I know, but that's how the plant. You could literally grow a cannabis plant off of just B vitamins.
Yeah, because that's like
no nutrients.
Sugars. It's like your sugars and all that stuff.
It's kind of crazy, but you could just use B vitamins total. You need a plan, obviously, but I've seen it done, and I know a lot of people ran that way for a long time. I don't doubt anything.
Me either.
And the most important part, this is what I would say the most important part of flower is. If you're at week 3 of flower, you should be planting another plant. You should be putting seeds in the ground.
Already planted.
See, you're wild. You're in double tent mode. You can get away with
Triple.
it. Triple plant mode.
Triple tent mode. I got 3. Germinate and get through like 2 to 3 weeks of veg in the little tent, then I can have 2 bigger tents.
Right, but you're gonna flip it in 2 to 3 weeks because your other ones are gonna be done in that time.
I take them from the seedling tent into the vegetative tent. I take the vegetative plant. It's already in the flower tent, and you can constantly rotate.
Well, for the people that have one tent,
for those of you with only one tent,
week 2 or 3, a flower, if you have a small area that gets light, is usually fine for a seedling. Even week 4 or 5, because you have 3 weeks. If you have another tent, like Matt said, as soon as you flip them, you should start them so that you can kind of eat up some of that time. But if you don't have another tent, a few weeks before you're going to chop, you can plant. And I think they're fine to start as seedlings under 12-12 for the first 2 weeks. I don't think anything's going to happen to them because you planted them and it wasn't fully fully summer yet. They're not going to just like re-veg in 2 weeks. You know what I mean? They're not going to flip and have anything happen to them. So I think you would be fine, honestly. But if you want to not make that close of a call for yourself, you just start at week 7, plant your seeds, But at least think about your next run while you're still waiting to chop your plant, because it saves you a lot of time. A lot of times you wish you did.
Because here's the thing too that you got to remember, and I feel like a lot of people think this way. They're like, "Oh, I'll grow a plant, 8 weeks of flower, 9 weeks of flower, I'll have bud." You gotta harvest that shit. You gotta dry it, cure it, and that process takes a minimum of a month. Minimum. So that's another 4 weeks.
Right.
So you kind of like want to keep shit coming every so many weeks, because that 6-7 ounces you got off that plant, how long is that really going to last you?
Right, but if it's a month that you're waiting after flip, right, and then you start 2-3 weeks before it's over, now that month becomes 2 weeks if you keep it at that.
Yes.
And if you do it and what you said at flip and at harvest, then you basically don't have to wait for anything. You always have something. So that's called perpetual harvest, and it's something that if you're a beginner, you definitely want to try to work towards planning to do, because wasting time is essentially that. Time is
It
money.
keeps you on your
Money is
toes.
dispensary costs, So if you don't waste your time, you don't waste your money at the dispensary. Just get more plants. More plants in the ground equals more yield. More regularly. How's your plant?
What?
How's your plant doing, sir? Or did you? Oh, you forgot that one day, right? Is that one gone? Do you start another one?
No, it's still alive.
Oh, it's good. The other one?
The one that I just germinated a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, what was that one?
Badass Cookies OG.
What is it? Oh yeah, Badass Cookies OG. It's doing well.
Yeah.
That's an auto?
It is not. It's a photo.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
So that one's going into the time machine.
Yeah, that's gonna be grown for a little while. Probably, I don't know. I'll probably do like maybe 7-8 week veg. We'll see.
Yeah, don't be surprised when your buddy starts growing and he grows out his first plant, and he gets like 7, 8, 10 ounces off of it, and it's a photo, and it took him like overall 120 days to do it, and he wants you to give him an ounce. Don't be surprised if you're the buddy that your friend's like, fuck off, dude. And you're like, what the fuck? You grew it for like free. Don't forget how much went into it, because you're going to be growing it for 3 months, waiting on it for a month.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to be having a good time.
Once you start growing, you're going to have a new respect for your
O's.
Let's just call them street gypsies.
Your street gypsies.
Your street gypsies that you would, occasionally procure product from. You have a new appreciation for all the hard work that goes into it. You're like, oh, this is why it costs $200, like $300. It's
right.
A lot that goes into it. Time. How valuable is your time? How good is your product? So,
output equals input. And
definitely product results reflect time. So, people usually with, the best results, not always, but are the people that dedicate their time, to growing the plant. Or if they haven't dedicated their time, they've invested quite a bit of money into equipment that
saves them time.
Right. But you're sacrificing one or the other. You buy the equipment, could be costly, to get everything all front. Or you can put in the time. At least put in the time until you can afford to do those things for yourself and make it up.
I mean, expensive isn't bad though, as long as you've done your research and you know that and this is tough nowadays, that you're getting what you pay for. And I don't mean like, it's cheap, so you bought something cheap. I mean, like, it's expensive and it's quality and who's backing it up and, all that jazz.
I mean, hey, in a perfect world, like everybody wishes weed was completely free. I'm sure.
It is.
I
Somebody
mean,
was
it
like,
could be.
somebody the other day, they had a post up with like 60 something thousand likes on it. And it was like, why can't weed and traveling be free? And I was like, grow your own weed and fucking ride a bike, dude. What do you mean? You just want to travel on a plane for free, go to some place for free, and smoke free weed that you didn't grow or buy,
Yeah.
you know? Everything's
Free
free.
weed, free weed, I can see, but like,
How expensive is weed?
I
You're
mean,
growing it.
it depends
100
how
bucks a
much.
plant?
Oh, if you're growing it, maybe not even, dude. 40 $40.
Have a
If
good
you know
night,
what you're
Rose.
doing.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So you can grow upwards of 6 to 10 ounces a plant, being an average grower for 40 bucks plus like electric and your
Yeah, no, I
nutrients
don't.
per plant that goes into it plus a
I mean,
seed.
not even. That's.
Seed, nutrients, soil should
I don't put
be
much. I don't put
40
much into
bucks a
my
plant.
plants. I don't put much into it. It's like that.
Seeds, nutrients, and medium should cost like 30 to 40 bucks a plant.
Yeah,
Right.
that's all you really need.
Right, but that's decent nutrients too. I mean, like uh you're spending like, probably $7 or $8 in medium for that plant, maybe $10 in medium. And then you're looking at $10 to $20 a seed. So right there, you're 26 to 16 to 26 bucks. To get to 40, you're really pushing it with nutrients that are quite expensive, but
I mean, that's like the
it's
overall
still not
cost.
that bad. If
Right.
you got 4 ounces for 40 bucks, I'm cool with that. You cool with that? I know you are. $10 O's. I'm cool with that, bro. And that's what we want you to realize, that you do it right and you have your stuff planned out. You could actually, quite easily understand how much it costs you to um, you know, grow per plant, per ounce, per your
All
electric
in due
bill.
time. All in due time.
Word.
Yeah, if you kind of like just hang out for a little bit, see what's going on over our way, like you'll definitely learn and you'll definitely see.
And nobody needs to get this right on their first grow. Does everybody want to get it right? Yeah, of course. Especially if you're a perfectionist like I am. But do you need to? No, I actually prefer that people fuck up first. I would prefer that. You know what I mean? Because getting it out of the way now helps you learn a lot. You only learn from failure. You don't really learn a lot from, just doing what someone told you and everything working out. You kind of just know how to listen. But
Yeah.
dealing with issues is how you truly learn how to take care of things on your own. So it's super beneficial if you screw up in the beginning because you're going to screw up eventually. There's
Yeah, it's inevitable. And
something
then
you're
even
going to
when you
get too
think like you're
comfortable.
done screwing up, you're gonna screw up. So
Right. You're going to get too comfortable with something. And then one day you're going to have to go. You're going to have to, because you put it off. You're going to have to go home and water, and everything in the world's going to happen. You're going to get called into somewhere. You're going to get home. You're going to open the door. Dog's going to run out. You're going to get home at like 2 in the morning, pass out, go to work the next day, forget about the plant, come back, and then you actually finally made a mistake and it cost you something. It's eventually going to happen. It happens to everybody, especially if it's inside, and you're not automated because your life takes precedence over this. Outdoors, it's not really always your fault. That shit. I would be so mad if an animal came and ate my plant or just trampled it. You know what I mean? I'd be so pissed.
I think everybody would be pissed. You know, it's a perfectly good plant. Just went to the shits.
Oh, I know, but like, I would be pissed and I would just give up until that animal died. I don't think I would try to figure it out. Going inside, at least, you know, you're not going to have something, unless it's your cat or dog, come and eat your plant.
We're gonna be covering harvesting next week.
We're going to be covering harvesting, curing.
Drying, curing.
I mean, it is your week, Matt, but yeah, it's the 10th episode, and I didn't want to make this a 12-step program.
It's one of my favorite parts is harvesting, drying, and curing. So
one of my favorite things is not making something for cannabis 12 steps, so we're going to do it in 10.
Word.
Yeah.
Because the 12-step program sounds like it's...
That's not the same. We don't have the same value. People are in too deep in a different way. They need 12 steps to stop popping seeds, not
we don't
not smoking. That would be great for Bean Poppers Anonymous. We get a coin for like 1,000 members.
All right. So harvesting, drying, and curing next week. Look forward to it.
Thank you everyone for coming out. And we appreciate our subscribers that were able to make it into the chat. We know this was the first week, so we're probably going to see a lot more of you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Make sure you catch us next week. Have a great night.